It's time now for the political analysis of Fromm and Fuller. Al Fromm, former political advisor to President Bill Clinton, and Craig Fuller, former political advisor to both Presidents Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. Good morning, all. Unfortunately, Craig, the subject has not changed very much since we last talked. The Republican House has not been able to find a leader. Ohio's Jim Jordan has gone down for the second time in defeat as of yesterday. As they say sometimes in the Midwest, this isn't funny anymore. This is a very difficult time for the country. And I think because of the tragedy in Israel and many other world events, I don't know how many Americans are aware of how serious this can be.
Well, it's very serious. I had a colleague years ago who used to enjoy the line of, he said, people told me to cheer up, things could be worse. And I cheered up, and sure enough, things got worse. I sort of feel like you're right. This week is a bit of a repeat, but it's the fact that we're where we are is even a worse situation for the Congress. Actually, honestly, the contrast to watching the president actually doing his job, flying around the world into a war zone to meet with Israelis, and that contrast to the Republicans in Congress in search of a leader is pretty stark. I think Biden gets a lot of credit for going there. I did see that the country of Israel was actually created 6 years after Joe Biden was born, so he definitely has vast experience with the history there. On the House side, I'm almost thinking, though, today we'll get another vote. We're doing this Thursday morning, this conversation, and sometime during the course of the day, we're supposed to get yet a third vote. All the stories coming out with people on camera, Republican congressmen on camera, saying that Jordan is likely to get fewer votes this time than in the first two attempts. Makes you wonder why he would even bring this to a vote. I do think there's perhaps a catharsis going on, if you will, that Republicans in the middle really are saying, this is just not acceptable, this choice. I mean, Congressman Jordan has not introduced legislation. He's not been someone who has built coalitions. He's, from the time he arrived, been something of a flamethrower. He couldn't, in a meeting, I think it was Monday, he would not acknowledge that Donald Trump had lost the election. And I think that there's enough Republicans in the House who are finally saying, enough is enough. And it's spread across the board. There's 22 of them yesterday, I guess. There may be more today. But it seems to me that one of the takeaways from this has to be that the Trump MAGA element of the party can't just with bombast have their way. And how we come out of this, or how the House comes out of this, I don't think anybody can know. It's interesting that they're thinking of giving more powers to the temporary speaker as a solution. But come out of this they will. But I do think in the process, as much of a concern as it is, and as messy as it's been, it's Trump's endorsed candidate for speaker has not won, does not look likely to win, and if anything, you've got a number of members of Congress moving towards more of a consensus builder, as opposed to somebody who clearly has not been there while he's served in Congress. If that's the case, maybe this has been a healthy exercise, but it's probably an exercise, in my mind, that means that come 2025, Republicans are not going to be in charge of the House of Representatives.
Is that how you see it, Al?
Well, I see it a little bit differently, but basically in the same way. First of all, Jim Jordan should not be Speaker of the House. As I said on, and I wanted to say this for a long time, on X, formerly known as Twitter. Uh, no speaker is better than Jim Jordan as speaker. Look, according to Craig said a little bit of this, according to John Boehner, Jordan's a legislative terrorist. Boehner happened to be speaker, Republican speaker from the same state as Jim Jordan. He's never passed anything. He's an election denier. He's an insurrectionist. He was right in the middle of January 6th, and he refused to comply with the congressional subpoena. How can you have a speech? Well, we already had one, I guess, and Kevin McCarthy, who also refused to comply with the congressional subpoena. I mean, I find that pretty incredible for the party of law and order. Basically, he's a danger to democracy. And to paraphrase Liz Cheney, shouldn't get anywhere near the speaker's chair. But what it really shows, and this is where I disagree with Craig a little bit, at least in degree. I think Republicans really have become a party of lunatics and anti-democratic small d zealots. And that's my second point. I've got 3 points. Second point is we're really witnessing the disintegration, the decimation of the Republican Party as we know it. Sadly, the nomination of Jordan is further evidence of that. And, Craig said, well, there are now 22 people who voted against him. What we have is, when McCarthy went down, they said, well, 96% of Republicans voted for him. Well, 90% of Republicans voted for Jim Jordan. So I don't really see that as an indication that Republicans are moving away from MAGA. Look, what we're seeing about this party, it can't run the one body that people entrusted it to run in our government, which is the House. I've said this before, it had no platform. It has no legislative agenda. Their presidential nominating process is in shambles. As we saw again yesterday in a New York courtroom, their leading candidate, Donald Trump, exhibits irrational behavior, usually anti-democratic behavior, every single day, either because he's finally yielding to the pressure of all his legal woes, or probably more likely because he really is suffering from dementia. And his challengers have been very tepid at best in going after him. And why is that? That's because they're afraid of rank and file Republican voters who have become a cult for Donald Trump. And that's why Jim Jordan was nominated. Members know better. They don't like him. He's one of the most disliked members of the House, probably on both sides of the aisle. But they're afraid that the Trumpies will primary him. So, that is a tragic situation to have one of our two great political parties in that shape. Now, fortunately, there is an answer. If we can find, in the end, 5 good, decent Republicans, you may need a few more, maybe a dozen, who are willing to have the courage to stand up to the Republican conference and to the MAGA Republicans and work with Democrats to elect a rational speaker. There's some talk of McHenry, the Speaker pro tem, being given additional powers, at least temporarily. That's possible, I suppose. And maybe it's possible that a group of Democrats and Republicans can get together and pick probably a Republican who's acceptable to the Democrats, and with a minority of Republican votes and a majority of Democratic votes actually elect a speaker. But Here's the bottom line to me. This is a crisis caused by the shambles in the Republican Party. And it's not going to be solved until a significant number of Republicans show the courage to buck, their party and put their country first. And that will happen eventually, but I'm not holding my breath that it's going to happen particularly soon.
Greg, do you think there are 20 Republicans who would see the importance of aligning differently from the main party at this point?
I think we might be getting there. My friend Al paints with a rather broad stroke brush. The Republicans in the Senate certainly don't line up and look like the Republicans in the House. The Republicans around the country as governors or in states, Republicans who did stand up to Trump don't look like that. I mean, I would argue that the House doesn't give a defender much to work with these days, but I think the reason that I do think there's a shift is that one of the polls that came out this week showed something interesting in that while people may not even know who the speaker is, whether his name is McCarthy or Jordan or anybody else, overwhelmingly Republicans, Democrats, and independents think it's a very bad idea for the House to go forward without electing a speaker. And the more these members of Congress have to face their constituencies, Republican and Democrat, I think the more they're going to be driven to a solution. And, there are ways to arrive at solutions, but it is going to probably require either some bipartisanship or just an acceptance that they have to move more to the middle inside the House. I don't envy the person who gets the job. I don't think it's going to be a very clear or easy path forward, but there's clearly things that have to get done, and I also think that as voters, we all need to look closely and hold accountable those who represent us in the Congress. My own Congressman, Andy Harris, has been a champion for Jordan. He's opposed continuing to fund the government. He's already announced he's not supportive of aid to Ukraine and to Gaza before the president even makes his speech today to announce it. And so there needs to be some pressure brought to those people who are simply going down this same downward spiral path that Jim Jordan seems to be taking the members. But but people that have to be held accountable, because that's how you get their attention. And at the end of the day, I have more faith in the Republican Party when it comes to actually voting, perhaps than Al does. And I think I've always thought it's going to take at least one, if not two, election cycles to work our way out of what's been a pretty bad period of time. But I think we will work our way out of it. And I think some of these members who are finding the courage to stand up, who are going to see themselves gaining support around the country in certain places, are going to encourage others to do the same. At least I hope that's the case.
Al, you have the last word this week.
Well, I hope it's the case too. We haven't seen much evidence of it, though. I mean, part of the problem in the House is that these districts are so gerrymandered that your only challenge is in a primary. And and Trump, as we've said, I think before on the show, has done something that we never did with Clinton. Obama never did. My guess is the Bushes never really did. And that is take control of all the state party apparatus. And so it makes it very hard in primaries in gerrymandered districts for somebody to go in and say, well, I'm putting the country first and I want to work with Democrats to get stuff done. When when their main opponent is a MAGA Republican who expresses the hard line, the irony is in most Democratic primaries, except in the most outrageously blue districts, the moderate candidates win. In most Republican primaries, the moderate candidates don't win. Look, I agree the Senate's better than the House, but for Republicans, but you've got an aging, pretty feeble leader who has done a lot of damage to democracy in his own right in Mitch McConnell. He screwed up the Supreme Court in the worst way. He makes a good speech about the lawlessness of Donald Trump after he votes to acquit him. He bears a lot of responsibility for the trouble we're in, and he's considered a moderate. Yeah. And he's probably a friend of the president, and but he's also clearly a sick man. And I don't really put a lot of hope in the Senate either. And I agree there's some good Republican governors, but where are they? Where are they? I've been on this show hammering Larry Hogan because instead of playing with this third-party fantasy at no labels, which he still continues to do, and making detrimental remarks about both parties, and trying to have this moral equivalency between the Republican train wreck and the Democrats, who may not be perfect, but certainly are not nearly, they're not the threat to democracy. Where is he? Where's Baker? Where's Schwarzenegger? Can't they call on people like Kemp and Sununu and current Republican governors who, DeWine, who seem to be decent people, and say, we've got to do something. We've got to have an intervention in our party. Yeah. Why can't they do that? It's not the same thing, I'm sure. But when we lost 2 of 4 elections by 49 states, a group of Democrats that I was involved in, helped lead, got together and said, we're going to try to fix our party. Where's that on the Republican side? So, and voters, the Republican voters right now, because the party's getting smaller, being more and more dominated by the extreme right wing, but voters can be led. And that's why you have leaders. What I'm looking for is that few good men or women to step up in the party and say, enough, because as Craig and I have said, there is a candidate that could be a viable candidate and could do this if she will step up too. And that's Nikki Haley. She's doing better, but she's doing better 30 or 40 points behind Donald Trump. And she has why aren't the Republican leaders calling on the other candidates to get out of the race? And maybe they'll do this after the next debate, which finally is going to be at a decent venue at NBC as opposed to Fox. Why can't they call on these other candidates who have no chance to get out of the race and get behind one alternative to Trump and make a big push and I'm sure the donors are ready. Yeah. Donors don't want to have a crazy man, and I'm sure people will say, well, he's too hard on Trump. He's disparaging of Trump. Look at the man every day. The man can't be president of the United States. And where are the Republicans who are going to step up and say it?
Al Fromm, Craig Fuller, thanks so much indeed. We'll see you next week.